Hello everyone, we are at Pikes Peak State Park now in the lands of Iowa. That's right, we are no longer in Wisconsin, we have crossed over into Iowa. And that is the Mississippi River behind me. Check it out. That we were actually looking into Wisconsin when we looked past the Mississippi River. Now the Mississippi River has an interesting story. I actually went to Lake Atopka several years ago, planted my flag there, so I claimed all the land at the waters of the Mississippi drain, which is basically this entire country. So when you're paying taxes, part of it actually goes to me. They just don't tell you that. No, I'm just kidding, they don't. But I would like for part of it to go to me. But anyways, let's talk about what it takes to actually be a national or reserve currency. First of all, you need something backing it. And that's something, the power of your government and the power of your military. The power of our military goes a long way to actually our dollar being the reserve currency. So any currency or cryptocurrency that wants to be the reserve has to have a strong, let's say, physical military force or government presence actually backing it. It could be a conglomeration of several countries or like a UN military force, although the UN's no more than a paper tiger these days. But you need something actually backing your currency. See, the thing is, a country could be like, a smaller country be like, we don't like your currency. We'd be like, well, you know what? My Tomahawk missiles that are sitting right side out your border says you like my currency. Oh, what's that? Oh, you like my currency. That's what I thought. Now keep liking our currency for now. So the US can basically do that because it has the strongest military in the world by far. So if some country doesn't like our currency as the reserve currency, a nice fleet of our battleships and aircraft carriers will convince them otherwise. We have much more power projection than anyone else. Second, some people actually sort of have to trust your currency. It needs to be like somewhat transparent, and the US government actually does let us know how much it actually prints, unlike the Chinese government. So China really can't be the reserve because no one really knows how much is actually out there, and that basically defies all amount of accountability. Now if China becomes more transparent, which will never happen, they might be able to be the reserve currency. But since that won't happen, they really can't right now. And plus, their military is nowhere near as powerful as ours. See, this whole I've got math backing it doesn't really work. See, if someone doesn't like your currency and you're like, oh, I have my mathematical principles backing it, they're gonna be like, yeah, sit down, kid, and let the adults talk in the other room. So your military and your government backing it, especially if you have an extremely strong military, is very important and vital for your currency to be the actual reserve currency of the world. You have to have something physical and something you can actually enforce your currency with if you want it to be the world reserve currency or the one world currency. Or you get all your allies to actually enforce it as well, or you get all the countries to come together and make a reserve currency, and that's how that actually works. So the other thing is, I know a lot of people don't like the concept of inflation, but a world currency or a world reserve has to actually have an element of inflation. Even gold and silver has an element of inflation. Gold and silver supplies are not set. We actually dig more of it out of the ground each year. And the reason for that is these pandemics, disasters, or recessions are going to actually happen regardless of which currency you use. For instance, this particular pandemic, it doesn't really matter at all if we use gold, USD, Bitcoin as our reserve currency. That's more or less completely irrelevant to the fact. Regardless of which one we actually use, it would have happened because the virus does not care which currency you actually use. So when there's something like this happens, your economy is going to suddenly contract and people are going to need to be bailed out. Not corporations, although they need it too, but individual people are going to need to be bailed out. And that's problematic if you can't actually expand your currency and print more of it. Because if you only make your currency worth more, then basically all you're really doing is giving people who already have money more money. It doesn't actually give money to the people who don't actually have money because they don't actually have any currency. So even if each unit is worth more, they still have a lot of nothing. Because if you have zero of something and that something is worth a lot, if you multiply them together, you still have zero. So it doesn't really work. So to be able to actually manage your country, the world monetarily, and especially to give money to developing nations, because we do that all the time, you actually need something that you can actually print. So that's the other thing. You can't actually have a currency that's completely stable because then you don't have any power to actually control it and actually help other countries out when they actually need help. Same thing with companies and other things. So that's another part of a reserve currency. You actually need to be able to print more of it, especially in a world with an expanding population and an expanding economy. You need to be able to facilitate that growth, not restrict it. So that's why you actually need the ability to actually print currency. So those are actually two things that a world reserve currency needs, because a world reserve currency, besides being the reserve, it also needs to be able to function as an emergency fund, which you can't really do, and you can't really manage any kind of monetary policy without. Now, a lot of people point to inflationary currency as the demise of past civilizations. That's just not true, because they didn't print too many like Roman dollars or anything for the Roman Empire to fall. The empire just simply got too big for them to actually generate enough food energy for the Roman Empire to fall. And then like you had disease and environmental factors. Essentially they just had their armies everywhere and they couldn't feed their armies because they didn't have, you know, the advanced communication and transportation systems that we had today. Same thing with the Mayan city-states. They didn't print too much currency. They basically fell because there was chronic warfare among the Maya states, and then they got hit by a series of droughts, which will happen regardless of which currency system you use. So that's like the arguments against printing more. There's really very little argument if you really think about it from a macro sense. There is from an inflationary sense, but generally, like for any reserve currency, you're going to need to actually be able to print. So those are the two conditions. You have to have something really strong backing it, and you actually need to have a mechanism to increase it or decrease it at any time for you to actually manage the economy. So that is kind of my bit here. Let me know what you think, and that's what I think needs to be a reserve currency. Yes, you do need to actually be able to control how much you inflate it by, and you need to have controls of like absolutely like the maximum you can inflate it by and have rules and have people governing those rules, but you actually do need to be able to print emergency funds. So that is what I have to say for today. Let me know what you think, like and subscribe, and hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.